who is to blame for dividing our society? Rishi Sunak says that extremists are deliberately undermining the country's multi-faith democracy. You saw him in that press conference on Friday. It was quite extraordinary. This came after the contention that Britain is descending into mob rule. Many have had a lot to say about the protesters, but we've always had protest. I remember being on marches against apartheid that could get quite lively. I remember being on marches against the poll tax, which were extremely lively. We had suffragettes throwing themselves under horses and, chaining themselves to the gates of the Commons. We've always had protests that's lively. No one suggested then that a mob was running the country or that extremists were trying to undermine us. It was his remarks in response to George Galloway winning in Rochdale. Well, we know the circumstances under which George Galloway has won in Rochdale. It's largely because Labour didn't have a candidate in the field. I've had a lot to say about George Galloway in the past. I think he's a carpetbagger who tends to whip things up. He will be a colourful character, no doubt, when he comes into the House of Commons, but I'm not sure how seriously certainly fellow politicians and most of the public will take the reality star that George Galloway is. I mean, every time you see that ad of him purring like a cat and behaving like a cat, he looks rather strange. He's a sort of peculiar individual. I remember when he won in Tower Hamlets, Bethnal Green and Bow, beat my dear friend Una King. And again, he wasn't a terribly effective MP for that area, and hence, subsequently, he lost. Is all of this legitimise? Does all of this legitimise Rishi Sunak summoning police, as he did last week, to Number 10, to have a go at them and say, look, what are you doing about this unevidenced claim of a consensus that a mob rule is replacing democratic rule in Britain? The only mob running Britain are the mob in Number 10. I mean, it's Rishi dancing to the tune of Nigel Farage, apparently. He might be joining the Conservative Party. It's Liz Truss, who claims that the Financial Times and the United States of American government brought down her premiership. It wasn't them that brought down her premiership. It was a nonsense that she got up to with Kwasi Kwarteng, despite being told not to slash taxes in the way that they did. And we're still seeing that nonsense trailed in preparation for the budget on Wednesday. It's Boris Johnson and his mob that were partying in Number 10. They're responsible for undermining our country. It's those who prorogued Parliament. Remember Jacob Rees-Mogg breaking the rules, shutting down Parliament so they couldn't be legitimate debate. Maybe they're responsible for undermining our democracy. Maybe it's Suella Braverman and her nonsense about pulling out of the ECHR and this nonsense of sending people to Rwanda. No one's gone to Rwanda and it's cost us millions and millions of... Maybe it's that mob. Maybe they're responsible for undermining our democracy. But I'm not sure at all that we should get too hot under the collar about George Galloway. I don't like him. I have to accept the people of Rochdale voted for him. I hope that they'll think again when the election comes at some point this year. I'm not that keen on, of course, the nonsense that Lee Anderson has spouted in the last week, Paul Scully has spouted in the last week, this nonsense about, Sadiq being under the spell of Islamicists and, oh my God, the list goes on. But surely, we can see through this, because what this is really about is anybody but them. They have been running the country for 14 years. They have been making the decisions for 14 years. They have run our economy into the ground. It's they that's put us in recession. They that's given us a cost of living crisis. If you're driving at the moment and you've just gone through a pothole, who did it? They did. You know, if your kids have been out of school or they're in porter cabins because of concrete problems, who's done it? They did it. You know, if you're waiting in A&E at the moment, if you can't get a GP appointment, who did it? They did it. If you're in the armed services and you've not got the right kit, you're in a building falling apart, or you can't get appropriate housing, or you're in a damp council house, or you can't get on a housing list. Who did it? Who's been running the country for 14 years? Who is undermining our democratic system? Surely it's the people responsible for the last 14 years that are the responsible. It's got nothing to do with George Galloway, as reprehensible as he is, and it's certainly got nothing to do with a rabble, a minority of protesters. Of course there are issues about some of the chants. Of course there are issues about hate. The police are quite able to arrest those and bear down on those who are behaving badly. Let us accept that in our country people are allowed to take to the streets and campaign. The cause that they're campaigning on, which is the Palestinian cause, is a legitimate one to campaign on. The loss of life is legitimate to campaign on. Those that protest also on behalf of the hostages, completely legitimate. This is not an issue, and it's certainly not worthy of the Prime Minister summoning everyone to number 10, the police and others summoning all the journalists to number 10 and giving the impression that there's some unelected mob running the country. But I want to hear your views. What is to blame for dividing our society? Are there, as Rishi Sunak complains, extremists undermining our democracy? And if there are, where are they coming from? Because I think he's got quite a few within his own party. And at a time of polarisation in politics, what does the government need to do to unify our society? Call me on 0345 6060 973. Herbie calling in from Harrow. Herbie.
Yes, good morning, David.
Good morning.
Well, you've got quite a lot of issues to confront you what's going on. You've got religion, you've got the politicians, which are to blame, naturally, and it's society itself that doesn't understand each other. You know, we've got our own difference of views and opinions and things like that, and we don't seem to talk about it.
Okay.
It always seems to build up into a crisis, and then something happens.
Okay, well, let's break down your points, Herbie. Let's take the first one, religion. What do you think about that, then?
Well, you know, we've all got, I said, whatever your religion is, I do not object to it. I don't condone it or anything else. You believe in your God, I believe in mine. Don't try to convert me and I won't convert you. I understand what you want me to do. If you want to take my shoes off and do this and that, I quite respect that. I've got no problems with that whatsoever. But don't ram it down my throat. Don't try to convert me. I'm quite happy as I am. So let me just get on with life and enjoy it. But don't force me.
Has anyone been trying to convert you or force you?
No, thank God they haven't. You know, I'm quite happy by not. You know, people come up to us and say, no, I'm not interested. Thank you very much. Please, you know, just respect my wishes. You know, and leave it at that. I don't get to confrontation. You know, or anything else. Like, not worth it, David.
It's a bit like, you know, a Jehovah's Witness knocking on your door. You can actually stop and talk to them, or you could say no, thank you, and they move on.
Exactly. And you know, I respect that. You know, it's what they believe in.
Is that any worse? Is the religion issue any worse or any different, not worse, any different to what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago?
Of course it is, David. You can see what's going on. You mean, so I'm not going to, you know, I'll put it in words for you. I mean, say the change from what was a Christian country to all sort of ethnic, religious and things like now going on. Yes, of course it has changed.
That's not, look, Herbie, Britain is still de facto a Christian country. The King is head of the Church of England.
Yeah.
However, we have become a much more secular country. There are less and less people going to church, less and less people that invite. What has that got to do with the 4 million people in our country who are Muslim, or the just under 300,000 people in our country who are Jewish? Nothing to do with them. That's to do with being secular.
No, they are, to me, their beliefs is their beliefs, and they show that. You know, they believe in their religion and they teach it, preach and everything. The Christian faith seems to have disappeared for some unknown reason. It seems to have lost its way. And these people, good luck to them. You know, if that's what they believe in, that's what they want to do, I accept that. You know, I can't. I'm not there to control it or condone anything else. I respect their wishes and their views, like they should respect mine as well. You know, this is what it's all about.
So do you think Rishi Sunak's got a point when he says that extremists are deliberately trying to undermine the country's multi-faith democracy?
Unfortunately, David, I think that is what's happening without saying too much about too many things. It seems to be under the carpet and it's now coming home to roost. It's just one of those things that are happening. We are facing changes like we've never, ever seen in our lifetime. We must respect that and look at that. You can see that yourself, David. The changes are beyond belief now. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse with the way things are going on.
Why is change, Herbie, a bad thing? And I'm trying to get to the nub of the change. It sounds like you don't feel free to say what you think, Herbie, which is worrying in of itself.
To be honest, David, I am. I really am afraid, because unfortunately, society now classes you maybe as racist or this or that and the other. It's best. You shouldn't keep quiet, I do admit that. But you have to be very careful what you say, because people may pick it up and take it the wrong way, yet again. Then you're to blame. You see, this is where things have changed so much, David. People do want to say things, but they're too afraid to say it because they're afraid of the repercussions that may come from it.
Herbie, we don't know who you are. People don't know who you are. Say what you think.
You try and do it without being accused of something, David. With the media the way it is now, it interprets it in a different way. We're facing different changes. With the way the media controls things nowadays, what do you expect, David? You can't say too much without upsetting somebody and then somebody having a go at you. You know, it's happening all the time, David. You know that. You're in the same boat as what most people are.
I feel free to say what I think. I've been saying what I think. I wouldn't have this show if I didn't say what I think. To be honest, I don't think it's got anything to do with undermining democracy. I mean, I think, as I said, I think the people who are undermining democracy are largely in the government. To be honest, I don't think the protesters are undermining democracy, because I think we've always had protests that gets heated. I mean, I don't actually think anything. I haven't seen the current protests anything like the poll tax protests that there were in the 90s when I was a student. Nothing like it.
No, well, those were really big
miners'
issues.
strike, nothing like it.
Oh, yeah, but David,
did Margaret Thatcher come out and say, "Oh, they're undermining democracy"? No, not really.
No, but unfortunately, David, you know, life has changed so much so quickly. Yeah, we are living in different times, and I don't think a lot of people really understand what is going on and what is actually happening. The government itself has made problems so vast, so big, it's becoming uncontrollable. And I think you must admit that yourself. Well, you've been saying about it, been in power for 14 years. They can't be to blame for everything, but they are to blame for some of the things that have gone on.
Herbie, thank you for calling in. So what's to blame for dividing our society? Rishi Sunak says that extremists are deliberately undermining the country's multi-faith democracy. Who are the extremists?